I don't even
Captain
remember.
Marvel.
Captain Marvel, not Mrs. Marvel. Sorry, guys. It's a sequel to Captain Marvel. So far, critics kind of hate it, but the audience kind of loves it. It is like the Marvels, not the Marvels. It is Marvel's shortest movie ever. Quite literally the shortest movie Marvel has ever released, ever in all of time. I don't have enough time to fact check that, but I'm pretty sure that that's
No, it is. It's like
valid.
an hour 45.
Yeah, it's insane, but it also makes me very happy because after seeing 1,200 million superhero movies that were like over 2.5 hours, that kind of like in the last 10 minutes, I was like, should I go pee a second time? Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe I need to. I don't know if I can hold it again. Those movies were that long. How was it? How did you feel about it? I'm hearing mixed reviews. Critics they don't necessarily love it. They are pointing at one of the newest actors as being the savior of it, if the movie can be saved at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, well, I've been sick all week and I'm even now like hopped up on medication. So like, I was just like, let me get as clear a mind as I possibly can to give as subjective an opinion on this whole thing. And so I went in and watched it on, I think it was, what was it? Friday, I believe I went and saw it. And so I will say the theater wasn't entirely full. I was looking at tickets, and whenever I was looking at tickets, I just saw like most theaters weren't filled to the brim. It was only maybe like the most premium format you might find that there were very few seats available. And then most other formats, like even the IMAX theaters, weren't like all that filled up. So that was a little, different than what you expect from Marvel movies on opening weekend. But then as far as the quality goes, I agree with you. I think Iman Vellani, who plays Miss Marvel, she steals the movie in terms of just her charisma, her charm. And I love Miss Marvel, the TV series on Disney Plus. I hope they continue to like make more seasons of that. And it's not just her, of course, it's her family. The fact that she's like a Pakistani American teenager and her whole family, like it's like they occasionally talk in Urdu, so I'm like, I understand all of that stuff. Of course, they have subtitles, so if you don't, speak the language, you can kind of hear you can understand what they're saying. But those touches and also the way the parents kind of like interact, and I personally can relate to that because I grew up with those kind of interactions. But then in this movie, it goes beyond just Miss Marvel and her family. Of course, you have Monica Rambeau, you have Captain Marvel, Carol Danvers, and they have this sort of strange aunt-niece connection relationship that has to kind of get resolved, and they have to kind of move past that, and kind of they grow pretty close together again, and you get some flashbacks to what has happened in the previous movie, what has happened sort of in between the events of Captain Marvel and the Marvels, and ultimately, I think it's a fun adventure where if you're going to go in there for basically an hour 45, let's say you go there for the trailers and you end up sticking around for what would be, I don't know, like 2 hours. That's still a very briskly paced and very, short amount of time to go spend in a Marvel movie, because these days we're used to seeing 3-hour runtimes with these movies, and that's like a long time. But the downside of that short runtime for me was this movie felt like it wanted to go for the Guardians of the Galaxy tone that James Gunn like sets so masterfully, especially with the first one, which I think is still one of the best movies that Marvel has ever made, is that first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. And I think in this situation, the movie could have used an extra 20 so minutes. And not so much because it was missing action set pieces. I think it was missing the moments between the action set pieces where you can kind of slow down, do more character development work, and really give the emotional beats more time to breathe. Whereas here, I think not having that extra time made the movie felt like, well, from the audience standpoint, you couldn't really breathe and take in what just happened in a big action set piece, because in the next minute you're off into another action set piece. And so your brain kind of gets overwhelmed. I've seen this happen with other superhero movies in the past. I think Batman versus Superman in its theatrical version had the same issue. They cut out 30 minutes and it caused like this weird pacing situation where it was so much going on, you couldn't keep up with it. And then when they added the 30 minutes back into the Ultimate Edition, you got a much better movie where it wasn't like hugely different because it was still like 80% the same thing or 90% the same thing, but it felt like it was more well paced, that you can kind of breathe a little bit, you can absorb the big set pieces and all the big plot developments before you moved on to the next big set of plot developments, because you had those scenes where the characters were just having conversation. And maybe whether it was a good cry or reconciliation or maybe some kind of funny interaction. There was still plenty of good humor in this. The other thing I was going to mention, this movie definitely felt like it took place before the events of Secret Invasion because of how Nick Fury's character plays it out in this movie. And then I was watching another review where they talked about this, that originally the Marvels was supposed to come out before Secret Invasion. And then I looked it up. I was like, yes, this was supposed to come out where I think it was like springtime, late springtime. And then I think they moved it around. So what was I think Guardians of the Galaxy, where Guardians of the Galaxy came out is around the time that the Marvels was going to come out. And then they were like, this needs more time for visual effects and reshoots. So they switched it. But then Secret Invasion still ended up releasing where it
didn't
did.
they actually wait because the VFX in Quantumania was so bad that they were like, we need to give everything extra time? I think we kind of talked about this. We might have talked about this last week, where the VFX team for the Marvels essentially got so backed up and were so overloaded that I think they actually might have struck themselves. Like there was
the Marvel VFX team has voted to organize into a union under, I think it's under IATSE, maybe. I don't know, maybe I forget which union they're unionizing under, but like the Marvel's in-house VFX team is now going to be unionized, and it may spread to like more VFX artists across the industry doing that. But definitely that was the thing. That was a thing. But for the Marvels specifically, they got moved from like, I think earlier this year, like I think it was May or something like that, like early summer, late springtime to its current release date. And as a result of that, of course, I think the order of events, I think it's weird because
it
Nick
just
Fury
is
went
not
through
in
a
like
lot in Secret
timeline order
Invasion.
as far as release date.
Yeah, and then Nick Fury, like in this movie, felt like way too lighthearted. Like it didn't feel like he was carrying the weight of everything that had happened in Secret Invasion. And it makes sense because when the shot at, he was probably acting as if this takes place, before Secret Invasion. And we know that they were kind of shooting a lot of these things with Samuel Jackson simultaneously, because they're just doing them on multiple sound stages in Atlanta. And he was going back and forth. There were stories about this at the time, but I'm sure at the time the release order was different. So he was kind of playing off the character accordingly. So it was a little jarring. That was a little jarring. And then some of the action set pieces in this, like the final fight sequence, I think was too brief and it wasn't all that impressive, other than a few shots that were very well planned and choreographed and shot well. But most of those really cute like not cute, but like great shots were in the trailer, like the big team up beat down shots. There wasn't anything beyond that impressed me all that much.
And so this is like one of Nia DaCosta's first Marvel movies that she's directed.
I think it's her first big studio movie.
Yeah.
Or one of her first. Yeah.
She's known for Candyman and Little Woods. I did see Candyman. I have not seen Little Woods. I don't know what that is. So yeah, I do think it's one of her first. I was like, I've never heard of that guy. Sorry. And I did like Candyman. I do remember that movie being a little bit of a short horror. So I'm curious to know whether or not, she was the right decision for this, or if that affected the overall image of the Marvels. However, I really am curious to know how much say directors actually have in Marvel movies, because Marvel is such a massive machine. The producers, the executive producers, Kevin Feige was one of the producers on this movie, obviously. I truly wonder how much say they have in anything. I wonder if any singular person on that set had any real say in anything that happens, because in these big machines, I think it's really hard to like break out and make a name doing something for yourself. But I wonder if Nia DaCosta, because this is her first shot, is going to get blamed that this is not doing so well. I mean, originally they projected that this was going to hit like 75 to 80 million opening weekend domestically. They then dropped those numbers and it might not even hit 40. That is less than half of the projected domestic number. That's bad. For
You know,
Marvel,
I'm gonna point out something even more like damning for this film.
yeah.
So, and by the way, like you just mentioned those numbers, the lowest that opening weekend number can go, domestic number, could be like 40 odd million, which is like terrible, like for a Marvel movie.
For Marvel movies,
But
yeah.
we've got this on screen. These, like, if you look at the numbers that the first Captain Marvel did, now granted, it was meant to be this bridge between Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame. So a lot of people just went to see it just because they were curious how it was going to connect between the two movies. Ultimately, it didn't do a whole lot of connecting between the two movies. It was sort of its own thing.
Yeah.
But I think that drove a lot of audiences in. Nonetheless, that first movie, it made like 153 million domestic, and it debuted to 456 worldwide. Now you look at the numbers for the Marvels, which is a direct sequel to that movie, more or less. Domestically, it may go as low as 40 odd million. It may be 60 million. Like again, you mentioned, like it was originally going to be 80 million, and those projections went down, which never happens with Marvel movies. And internationally, it was tracking at 80 million. So when you do the math, let's say it makes 60 million domestic and 80 million international, that's 140 million total. And you look at that and you compare that to Captain Marvel, that's a difference of like two, maybe not two, like 3 or 4 times. Like Captain Marvel made 3 or 4 times as much money, depending on where the last final number at the end of the opening weekend lands for the Marvels. That's a big drop off. That's a huge drop off. That's the exact opposite of what we get with like the movie franchise like John Wick, where each movie, each successive film is making more money than the previous one. And you know, that's what you want to, that's what studios want to see in a movie franchise, that each sequel makes more money than the last one, and it grows and grows and grows. That's what we saw with Guardians of the Galaxy. The first movie made like 700 some odd million. The second made like 800 odd million, and I think the final one made like 900. So like it wasn't a huge difference, but like it kept climbing. But like with the Marvels, it just seems like it's going in the other direction. And then when you look at the Rotten Tomato score, 62%.
Yeah.
It started out in the 50s, so it's gone up, and now it's got like 200 plus reviews in there. So it's not rotten by their standards, but 62% is not like in the 80s or 90s, which is what Marvel used to get on a regular basis. And even though the audience score is 85%, I think anytime you get an audience score that's like less than 90% for a Marvel movie, people do start to worry a little bit, because like that means there's enough people out there who didn't like it. And then when I was looking into the Rotten Tomatoes score, and you look at the average critic score, like because they give you like 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10 on average, it was like sitting at 6 or 5 something out of 10. So even the people who were giving it positive reviews are kind of giving, like, they're only like half positive. They're like, you know, it's not the greatest movie, but it's like at least Marvel's having fun. It feels more like Iron Man than it does like, you know, like some of the more recent like Eternals, like which took itself too seriously. So they were like half like underhanded compliments. So even the positive reviews aren't exactly all too positive, which is unfortunate to see for a Marvel movie like this, because like I said, this movie, if they gave it 20 more minutes, I think it would have made it much better. It certainly had some tonal issues. There was a huge sequence where there's a ton of cats involved, which just that blew my mind. I was like, what is, like, I love cats. I am all for watching cat videos all day long, all the time. Like, I'm the one person you'll find probably once in a while going down, you know, rabbit holes on Instagram watching cat videos for hours on end. But having said that, I still struggle with how they use like the alien cats that can eat people, because they're sort of like extra dimensional beings that, so they can conserve space. So they didn't have enough craft, spoiler alert, enough crafts to escape the space station with like people just shoved into crafts. So they were like, cats should eat all these people, and then they can spit them out when we get to Earth. And that way we'll just shove like these small cats into the crafts, and we have room for that. And it was just like the most, it was James Gunn like creativity, but the way it was handled in this movie felt rushed and a little like Really? And it came at a time when the dramatic tension was high because the villain is coming to take our sun and basically destroy our solar system. And then all of a sudden they throw this in there, it completely diffuses that tension until we then move on to that, the whole fight sequence after that. So there was a lot of tone, like it just felt like a roller coaster ride in terms of like the
Yeah.
tonal shifts.
And this
There was a
movie
whole
went through
dance sequence.
so many re-edits because originally this movie I do think was supposed to be a little bit longer from what we had read about. It seemed like this movie had already gone through so many rounds of revisions that the end piece was so, and one of the reviews actually said it was like this movie has been hacked to pieces. So I definitely think any tonal issues was more on the editing side than on the filming side, which also makes me sad because it's like they're making the same missteps that DC was making. And now I just hope they don't follow suit with like ending things too early or, sort of like jumping the gun with axing projects that didn't necessarily deserve it.
Yeah, I think this you brought up a good point earlier that Marvel is they kind of treat their directors like TV directors, where in
Yeah.
the TV show, directors come in, they direct the episode, but like the overall look and feel of the show is dictated by the producers. And Marvel, that's like Kevin Feige and his team of like the writers' room that they have. And so Nia DaCosta, I think she probably didn't get to exercise all of her filmmaker's tools in her
Yeah.
tool belt that you would otherwise do in a movie that, the kind of movies that she has been known for. And there was even this rumor, which I think has been disputed by some people in Disney, that she at one point in post-production left the movie to start working on her next film,
Oh, yeah.
which, depending on if it's true or not, I still think ultimately, Kevin Feige does, as always, come in and make adjustments, especially in post-production, so that when they go and do reshoots, they have the ability to kind of pivot and change things that aren't working. And that's not always a bad thing because they've been doing that since the beginning. And all the big successes of the Marvel Cinematic Universe have that approach to thank for. But then there's some instances where it just feels like maybe a corporate mandate, or maybe they just had a turd and they were just trying to polish a turd. Maybe that's what happened here. I don't know. Like it definitely feels like this movie, like it was pieced together and some things were taken out, there were pieces missing, and that's where I think the pacing is the issue that I kept feeling. Like there was this, like for example, they went to this like fantastic world which apparently is 95 or something percent covered by water, and apparently the villain Darben wanted the water from that world for her Kree world Hala. And so she was opening this wormhole which was going to suck the water out, which is like a big part of this movie. It's like a repeating occurrence. That's her big thing. She's creating these wormholes to like take resources from other planets and bring them over to hers. So, and they go to this planet. It's almost like it reminded me of, I think it was, yeah, The Empire Strikes Back. Where they go to the cloud planet and
Yes.
you get Lando introduction, and you kind of get to breathe in that world a little bit before Darth Vader shows up, and then they have to kind of run out of there and blah blah blah. But in this movie, like they jump in and they kind of like stumble through a huge a song and dance sequence, which was like cringy as heck. And then we just sort of like rush into another battle sequence where they're flying through the air trying to like run away because the Darben wants Miss Marvel's bangle because she has the other bangle and she wants the two of them together to create this ultimate wormhole to steal our sun. Again, more complicated plot details, but like you just never got to live in that world for a little bit. Even in Interstellar, when they went to that big water world, you kind of like see and what this world is about before the big wave comes and they have to escape. I just felt like this movie's pacing was off, and then they had some cringy things in there that maybe they shouldn't have had in there. So yeah, I think the movie ultimately, if you look at the reviews that are on Rotten Tomatoes, if you talk to a lot of people that have gone to see it, it's a good time at the theater, much like Thor. Thor, not
Love
Ragnarok.
and
Ragnarok
Thunder.
was amazing. Thor: Love and
Love and
Thunder.
Thunder.
Thor: Love and Thunder was a great time at the movies, but when you went home and thought about it, you were
Oh, wait, what?
there was a lot of problems that you like, oh, that didn't make sense, but why this and that? For example, in this movie, they show Kree colonies on these other planets. One of them gets destroyed, and they have to evacuate. Not the Kree, the Skrulls. and they have to evacuate the Skrulls. And in Secret Invasion, the whole thing is that Nick Fury hasn't been able to find a refuge for the Skrulls, so they're stuck on Earth. And in this movie, there's like they say like at one point the Skrulls occupied like 25% of the galaxy. I'm like, so it was not a problem at all. I mean, you got Captain Marvel out there with spaceships. Why didn't she just take the Skrulls from Earth and go settle them on another planet, or even the one that we saw in this movie where there was a whole colony of Skrulls that got destroyed? But like still, the whole it sort of like nullified the point of Secret Invasion for me in some ways. Like so it just and there's some like gaps in logic like that. And similarly, I think the way they connect the post credit scene in this movie, big spoiler alert. Anybody who's watching, please click away if you don't want any spoilers here. But they have Kelsey Grammer come back and reprise his role as Beast from the X-Men movies in the early 2000s. And because Monica Rambeau, who's like Photon, like she's the niece of Carol Danvers, ends up in this other parallel reality at the end, and it's the one where the X-Men exist. So
interesting.
Not to mention the other team up movie they hinted at beyond the X-Men. At the end of this movie, Miss Marvel goes to you know how Haley Steinfeld was in Hawkeye? She's like the new Hawkeye. So Miss Marvel shows up at her doorstep, like not at her doorstep. She's like so Haley Steinfeld's character walks in, and she's sitting there in the dark. He's like, "Who are you?" And she's like, "You just became part of a bigger role." She basically repeats all the lines that Nick Fury had the first time he meets Iron Man at the beginning, like at the end, I think, of the first Iron Man movie. And it was clever, and I got a few laughs out of it because basically the whole gist of that scene was Miss Marvel's trying to recruit this new Hawkeye to be part of a Young Avengers team. She's like, "I'm putting together a team. You want to join?"
Okay.
So,
I mean, that's kind of cute. It like ties it all in together.
Yeah. And I think so there was a lot of fans out there who have been like, they're gonna do Young Avengers. They're gonna do Young Avengers. It's gonna happen. And then I think Kevin Feige and a lot of the people officially involved with Marvel have been denying it. But here they explicitly for the first time are like, yes, it's gonna happen. So there's probably gonna be a Young Avengers show or movie. The X-Men, I don't know if the Kelsey Grammer Beast version of X-Men is, because he literally says, "Oh, Charles wants to see wants an update." So there's a Charles Xavier.
Yeah, there's a world in which he might come back.
Yeah. So
I think that's kind of cool.
If you're a fan of the X-Men, if you're a fan of Marvel Comics, if you're a hardcore fan, you're gonna like the way this movie ends. But as a movie itself, it's still disappointed me. Like I think it had potential. Like if I had to give it a score, I would give it maybe a 7 out of 10, 6.5 out of 10. I have to probably watch it a second time to really narrow that number down. But I think the Rotten Tomatoes score is pretty reflective of what this movie deserved, ultimately.
Oh, this makes me a little bit sad, but hopefully moving forward, Marvels can just pivot and not get too holed up on how this didn't play out.
Yeah. I mean, guys, let us know in the comments. What did you think about the Marvels? Did you even go see it? Were you excited about it? Did you love it? Like I said, I had a pretty good time with it at the movies, but there's still a lot of problems with the movie, and being as objective as it can be, I think they left a lot on the table here. Maybe if they cut out 20 minutes, they should have left those 20 minutes in there. But let me know in the comments. Let us know what you think, and like and subscribe for more content like this. We'll be reviewing all the Marvel content that's coming out in the months and years, the months to come. I have to catch up on Loki myself. But once I do, I'll let you know what I thought about that, because apparently the finale was amazing. So plenty more to come from the Marvel end of things.